Well, little Dumby Trump wants to play some more. He did a part two, so let's complete the evisceration.
You understand is inflation, very basic economic idea. You've got your income, let's say you make, well, let's put some real dollars in here. I'll just explain it first. Let's say you make a nominal dollar amount, let's say $100,000 a year, and there's a price level in the economy. You divide the amount of money you make by the price of the goods you want to buy, that equals out to your real income. So let's put some dollars to it. You know, you make $100,000, and let's say you only want to buy pigs. Every pig costs $100. Okay, let's divide it by the price. We have 1,000 pigs. Okay, so we have 1,000 pigs. Very basic math right there. And so what happens is, over time, inflation will increase this factor. The price of pigs is going to increase. So what's going to happen when the price of pigs increase? Well, the price of pigs might increase, let's say, over a long period of time to $150. Right? Now, in order for things to make sense, your word should still give you 1,000 pigs. Right? In a simple assumption here. So, when the price of your good, the goods you want to buy increase, you're going to go to your employer, you're going to say, look, I can't really, I'm getting paid less now. I only have 750 pigs, or whatever. So you're going to say, look, I'm getting paid less because of inflation, prices are increasing, you have to pay.
Really, that's enough. Yeah, I speeded that up. Look, he's basically saying that inflation is a good thing and it always balances out. That somehow the inflation, when this commodity goes up and that commodity goes up and it all goes up, and so it doesn't matter. But that's the whole point here, is that what we have done is deferred inflation. We have devalued the money by borrowing money, and we have deferred paying for that devaluation or realizing that devaluation. So when we carry out $11 trillion in debt, okay, as the federal debt, that's a devaluation of the currency, and it hasn't been paid. So it's an inflation that has never been realized. It's unrealized inflation. So it's the same thing with your personal debt. Until you have to pay it off, okay, it's not inflationary. If you can defer paying it off, then you've deferred the cost of the money you received, that you injected into the economy, that you realized the gain from. And so that's the dam of this artificial devaluation of the dollar, which is the same as inflation, that we have created, because we have for 70 years not paid our bills. And by not paying our bills, we have deferred this horrible growth stagnation that's going to take place when we actually have to. So we either have to tax people $1 trillion a year more, or $2 trillion to pay off the debt, or, which would be terrible for economic growth, or we have to cut government spending by $1 trillion or $2 trillion, which means that $2 trillion worth of employment has to be destroyed. That's the cost of this thing, and so we've never realized the cost of it, and so this is just idiotic. Inflation is not a good thing. Ideally, you don't want to have inflation. The only reason why we have it is because we create bullshit money in an irresponsible way. We don't create the money, we don't print the money in exact proportion to real growth. We print the money based on the artificial debt growth, and that's where the system breaks down. You can have a fiat currency, you can have fractional reserve banking, and it can work, but it has to be strictly controlled so you never print more money than real growth, because as soon as you do that, you will inject inflation. And if you don't pay for that inflation right away, if you don't realize it right away, it can just keep building up behind the dam, and then 1929 shows up and you're all shit.
Problem in society, sometimes it's a lot slower and laggy, but overall your real values aren't going to change because as prices increase, your wages are going to increase. This is called inflation. It's a very basic tool. Just because there's inflation happening in the economy doesn't mean that your money's constantly being worth less and less. Maybe each $1 is worth less and less, but you're going to be making more of those dollars because of the inflation. You kind of get that?
No, did you kind of get that when you don't pay your bills, okay, then that's stored inflation? Did you kind of get that? You do kind of understand that you can live on the delusion of prosperity because it's built on fake money, printed money, money that was never earned through work. Its value has been destroyed because we printed it, okay? Idiot.
Okay, so then you talk about Google and how they're taxing everything. Well, what Google does is they provide a good service. That's why they can charge for it. They've amassed a website that is just the best out there for advertising.
No, look at Google's history, okay? The first 2 years didn't make any money, gave everything away for free, So yeah, everybody found it to be the place to go to because it was quick and efficient. Didn't have any advertising on it whatsoever. So of course everybody was attracted to that. So it suckered us in, okay? And so it became the place to go. That's where everybody tried to get indexed in Google. So now it's just like the Microsoft scenario where everybody built software for a Windows platform. Now we all became dependent on Google because Google was where everybody was trying to get indexed. And then they decided to be a for-profit company. They changed their motto from, yes, we need to create a non-commercial alternative, to we are going to be the worst commercial shysters on earth. I've made this argument: if Microsoft did what Google did and put their ads on other people's websites, everybody would have been appalled, disgusted. Microsoft couldn't do it. They even tried to do it, and everybody made so much noise even before they did it that Microsoft didn't do it. So that's how this thing was created. That's its origins. And as it exists now, it's a search engine, asshole. It suckers people in with the search engine, okay? Its advertising is completely irrelevant to that function. We should be able to have a search engine that isn't dependent on being a advertiser throughout the whole internet. And the whole point is by creating dysfunctional search, by creating search that's less than perfect, less than honest, less than reliable, a business is forced to play the Google game, because they can't get rationally indexed in the goddamn index, okay? Because the index is always going to sit there and Britney Spears-ize everything on the first page. Everything on the first page under any keyword is always going to be tilted to what is popular keywords. And we can see it now. I mean, you'll see in the top 10 results on most keywords that there's at least 3 or 4 pages in there that are just directory pages that are completely shystered Google, completely fooled Google's dumb, ignorant software program into thinking they're a content page when they're not.
Everyone goes to Google. They're not going to give out free advertising. If you want to pay to advertise on Google, you're going to have to pay the money. And that's just the way things go. And it makes sense.
No, it doesn't make sense, because that's the cost of doing business. Now we're back to the cost of doing business. So if you raise the cost of doing business, and this will be important later in your idiotic moronic commentary, who pays that price? The consumer. Okay, the businesses never pay the price. The stockholders don't pay the price. The CEO doesn't pay the price. The consumer pays the price. Okay, so if a business has some burden it has to pay, that burden comes out of the pocket of the consumer. So every consumer on the internet, like I said, is basically paying, every business on the internet is paying a Google tax. Okay, because they've got to play the game to do business on the internet. And it shouldn't have to be a game. It should be run by a public library, for Christ's sakes, not a for-profit business.
They're advertising to a lot of people, just like television ads do, just like radio ads or newspaper ads do. It's all called advertising, and just because there's a new market, there's a new website out there that does it, doesn't mean that it's changing everything.
It's called a crooked line, okay? Maybe you have enough grasp of economics to understand that there's this thing called production and the thing called consumption. And ideally, you want that line to be as straight as possible. You want the consumer to be able to get to the production as efficiently as possible. What Google does is put a bunch of crooked lines in the goddamn line. Okay, it's not a direct line between production and consumption anymore. Now it's the Google line. Okay, you got to play the goddamn game. So you got to waste money and resources competing with other companies, all trying to get on that first page on Google. And so you create whole industries where people are doing nothing else but trying to shyster and bend their content and the substance of what they're providing on the internet to satisfy the demands of a search engine. They're not trying to satisfy customers, they're trying to satisfy an arbitrary standard set up by a stupid, idiotic business.
Yeah, advertising is a cost of doing business. Doesn't mean that Google is this evil empire. They're actually helping. They're making things easier to buy online. You know, that simple.
Yeah, it's just no, it's not simple. It's simple that this is completely corrosive to efficiency. That's the obvious thing. When you give people a right to, and then they give them a patent right, it's just like the Microsoft scenario. We were all obliged to buy a less valuable, a less good operating system because all this other software had been built on top of it. Google's just taking advantage of the innate property where there's going to be a monopoly owner in this industry. It's one of those industries that just tends towards monopoly ownership. Okay, just because the people don't have time to try to shyster 15 different search engines, then we have time or money to spend on one. So they choose the biggest one, the biggest player. It's just like YouTube has already, it's hard to compete with YouTube. If you started a place tomorrow, it would be hard to compete because the eyeballs are already at YouTube. And that's the scenario that's created. And so they have an artificial advantage that allows them to exploit the environment.
Yeah, businesses don't necessarily work towards goals that are, consistent with what society fully wants. Sometimes they do things that don't make total sense for society. And that's just the nature of the beast that we live in.
Yeah, right. Now, the beast that you insist we live in. Assholes like you demand we live in because you're going to keep buying moronic rhetoric. Okay, you're going to keep supporting this broken system because you won't acknowledge the brokenness can be fixed and it can be easily fixed.